Alright everyone, times are definitely troubled at the moment, but I just wanted to take a moment to criticize one particular claim, which it seems that both a lot of people on the farthest left and some of the ethnonats fundamentally agree, and when they fundamentally agree and accidentally evince horseshoe theory, it's always funny, but they all want, or expect in some cases, the United States to Balkanize. The idea is that it would be along like racial or political lines, depending on who you ask, of course. Not only would that be a shitty idea, it's one that's fundamentally non-working, which is you've got to understand something. It's very easy to lure yourself into thinking that everyone is all up in arms, constantly stressed, and everything's falling apart when you're on Twitter, so to speak. And it's not just that, that's an oversimplification, but you get the idea. In reality world, the average American lives a reasonably comfortable lifestyle, is not currently in an area that's undergoing race riots, and generally speaking, things are going okay. Right now, we have a compounding of different things leading to increased social stress, but they're temporary. One is a pandemic. Pandemic's beginning to wear down. Number two is lockdowns. The lockdowns are waning, and people are ignoring them anyway, so they're no longer particularly enforced. You'll get arrested if you go to the beach, but you won't get arrested if you throw rocks at night. I don't understand how blue states can operate this way and claim legitimacy, but it seems to be the case. Number three is racial tension, but we've seen that before. We saw it on Ferguson. We saw it with the LA riots. We saw it with O.J. Simpson. We saw it in the riots in the summer of 68 through 69. Period. This is not a new thing. In fact, these particular riots, while more widespread than most, aren't even necessarily in all cases that vicious. The idea, there's certainly a difference. The cat's got a little catnip in her, I think. There's a difference between a couple of shops got looted and what we saw in like Minneapolis or DC with widespread damage. Most of the rioting's not quite at that same level. The idea that because the Antifa takes over a couple of blocks of Seattle because the police choose to withdraw to allow legitimate protests to go forward unperturbed because they don't want a situation, the idea that that's some sort of revolution, or that the United States legitimately has enough social stress going on to need to Balkanize, and the idea that the powers that be, number one, and the citizenry, number two, would accept that, I think is bullshit. No, private citizens wouldn't allow an attempt to Balkanize. Insurrection wouldn't be tolerated. I've already spoken about my own feelings about it. If something like that were to happen, if you were to have like Rebellion 2.0, let's say you have a secession movement, and they attempt to enforce their demands, if that state's governing system has dissolved, and it's no longer functionally part of the United States as a political entity, and it doesn't have any alliances, and it doesn't have any international recognition, and it becomes essentially, under U.S. law, just an unincorporated rogue state, you can go in there and do whatever you want with impunity, and there's not a whole lot legally anyone would be able to do about it. Be a very fun time if California were to secede. It's even funnier. A few years ago, riots back then, they're like, well, the Californians, these blue states might split off. California's secession movement. Now they're talking about, well, maybe these white Republican states need to get together and secede. But it's a bunch of fucking bullshit. The whole concept of the United States was under a civic model. The idea was that togetherness went beyond religion, number one, which tended to play a role in Europolitics back in the 1700s, and ethnicity, number two. Now, did the founders envision a future in which people from Africa and Asia and so forth would be full citizens of the U.S.? No, of course not. Not in the sense of the 1700s. But they did cobble together different European ethnicities in a way that nobody had really done before. The European states were ethno-nationalistic. By and large, with the exception of certain cosmopolitan cultures, maybe France or something, that had absorbed some expat movements. You did have rental soldiers, of course, especially the different Hessian groups. This definitely occurred. For the most part, the cultural enclaves were united in the ethnic sense. They were also united in the linguistic sense to a lesser extent, and usually religion. Religion tended to be part of a state. The United States threw that concept out. There was no longer a unifying religion. It was Christianity, but the idea that Christianity is hegemonic was not something that was thought of in the 1700s. The idea was that you could take different groups of people that traditionally had fought each other for 1,000 years and put them together, and with a proper civic model, they could live together properly. It worked. Now, of course, people now say, well, there's a difference between that group of people in Europe and a group from Malawi or something. Well, you can make that argument, but that doesn't necessitate Balkanization, number one, nor does it make it legally feasible. Then people say, well, it's the right of states to secede. Not really. For the most part, they ceded that right to become part of a union. There are exceptions. Texas technically enters it with an understanding under its constitution that allows for secession, having been an independent republic when it joined, as opposed to an unincorporated region that petitioned and became a state. Vermont is the other example. As far as I know, those are the only two. Vermont would be a small, powerless, landlocked state that would become a vassal of Quebec. No Vermonter wants to be a vassal of Quebec. That's not going to happen. And Texas, every few years, they have an election they don't like. A Democrat gets into power and they start rambling about secession. This is not a mainstream view. If you're on Twitter, if you're on the politically edgy side of Twitter as I am, yes, you will see a lot of support for the concept. Things are falling apart. Maybe there'll be a civil war, Balkanization. These race riots will spread and you'll have to have rooftop Caucasians or something. By and large, though, it's not going to happen. This is an inner city phenomenon where there's social alienated groups who, because of propaganda, believe the president is Adolf Hitler. This is a small proportion of the left. This isn't even a mainline leftist issue. So you got to calm your jets a little bit. Things aren't quite as bad as they seem. And as I've pointed out, it's always darkest before dawn. Stop worrying so much and get active. You're worried about things? Buy a gun. Talk to your neighbors. Form a citizen militia. It's legal. You can do that as long as you're not going around attempting to lynch people or something. Get involved in politics. Run for office. And definitely go fucking vote. Oh my God, society has fallen, says the person who does nothing to prevent society from falling. Yeah, okay, well, fucking stop complaining then. At some point you got to. That's about all. Peace out.